I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip, hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop.
This episode is brought to you by TaxAct. Don't do your taxes alone. Join TaxAct's National Admin Night. Admin nights are social gatherings for getting through your to-do list. So get ready for a night of fun, finding deductions, and filing taxes with TaxAct, where you can file your federal and state return for just $49 through April 8. Let's get together and get them over with. Visit taxact.com/admin-night for details.
Do you take such a trip in order to be direct? Is that actually the purpose of it? Or is the purpose of it to get lost in a pine forest and taking pictures of rhododendrons and talking to monks? There's just a question there, just broader about the purpose of travel, purpose of taking time out of your life to visit a fragile region. What is your reason for going to these places?
That is today's guest, Sarika Bansal, reflecting on a lesson she took away from a trip she took to the Everest region not too long ago. So Sarika went to the Everest region to research and write an article for the travel magazine Afar, where she had the very cool job of serving as editorial director. I think you are going to love today's conversation with Sarika. She is an experienced and incredibly thoughtful travel writer, storyteller, and editor. Sarika grew up in the United States, and she now lives with her family in Nairobi, Kenya. So in today's conversation, you're going to hear Sarika talking about her journey into travel writing and some of the important life lessons she's learned during her travels. She also shares some of her favorite unexpected things to do in Kenya, a lot to look forward to there. And we got into a topic that I find kind of fascinating, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this too, this question of country counting. Is this something you do? Do you know how many countries you've been to? Is this something you keep track of or you care about? So Sarika and I both share some reflections on this topic, and she offers what I thought was a really powerful analogy in terms of how to think about this. So you will get all of that and so much more today. So my friend, get cozy, settle in. Thank you for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams.
Hello, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, the show to help you travel the world on your terms. I'm Paige McClanahan, travel writer, author, and former travel journalist. I'm also a member of the Zero to Travel Host Collective, and I am thrilled to be with you today for this episode featuring travel writer, author, editor, and world traveler, Sarika Bansal. Before we get into it, remember to sign up for the free podcast newsletter to keep in touch and get updates on new episodes. The newsletter also helps you stay on top of travel trends, get money-saving travel advice, and loads more. Check that out at zerototravel.com/newsletter. So one of the topics that Sarika and I really get into in this conversation is this question of country counting. Do you know how many countries you've been to? Is this living in a spreadsheet somewhere on your computer? I used to have one of those lists. I don't anymore. But I'm not sure that that's necessarily a right or wrong thing. It's a complex thing, right? And I think it gets to questions around motivations when we're traveling. Why are we going places? What are we looking for? Really deep down, what are we looking for when we go there? And I remember a few years ago, I did an interview for the New York Times that really kind of got me thinking more about this question of country counting. It was when I interviewed Rick Steves, the great American travel icon, author, TV show host, PBS TV show host, Rick Steves. I asked him this question, and here's his answer. I'll read it for you. He said, Why would you count countries? Is it a contest? Anybody who brags about how many countries they've been to, that's no basis for the value of the travel they've done. You could have been to 100 countries and learn nothing, or you can go to Mexico and be a citizen of the planet. I find that there's no correlation between people who count their countries and people who open their heart and their soul to the cultures they're in. So that's one perspective on this question of country counting. In today's episode, you're going to hear my perspective and Sarika's perspective on this question as well. And I would love to hear yours too. What do you think about country counting? Is this something you do? Why? Why not? I'd love to hear. In today's episode, you're also going to hear Sarika's favorite off-the-radar unexpected things to do in Kenya, the country that she calls home. Now, I personally loved this part of the discussion because Kenya is one of my favorite places on earth. I called Kenya home as well for about 4 years. In fact, my younger daughter was born in Nairobi, a fact that she's very proud of. So there is so much to look forward to in this interview. Stick around on the back end, and I'm going to share one of my own fascinating and off-the-radar places to visit in Kenya. This place is just magical. It's beautiful, and it's really not very visited. So stick around. I look forward to sharing that with you. But for now, let's get into the interview. So welcome to Zero to Travel. I'm here with Sarika Bansal. Thank you so much for joining me today, Sarika.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you.
So we're going to be talking about travel writing. We're going to be talking about off-the-radar things to do in Kenya, which I'm super excited to get into, and which is the country that Sarika calls home. And the big topic of our conversation today is going to be country counting. Is this something you do? Is this something you have done? Sarika and I are going to give our perspectives on that, but I'm super eager to hear what she has to say. But before we get into it, I want to introduce Sarika because she is a super impressive woman. Just listen to this bio. So until earlier this year, Sarika was the editorial director of Afar magazine, which is an excellent travel magazine if you haven't come across it yet. It puts a huge emphasis on sustainability as well as on really compelling storytelling. But before coming to Afar, Sarika was editor of the book Tread Brightly: Notes on Ethical Travel. She was also the founder and editor-in-chief of Bright Magazine, an award-winning digital magazine that told solutions-oriented stories about social change. Before that, Sarika incubated 2 social impact publications at Medium. She developed a curriculum for journalists at the Solutions Journalism Network, and she served as a management consultant at McKinsey & Company. I'm guessing, Sarika, was that right after you finished at Harvard?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
And yeah, Sarika
took a way left turn into journalism.
Oh, yeah, there we go. So Sarika, yes, is a graduate of Harvard College, and she has a master's in public administration from Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs. As a journalist, her byline has appeared in the New York Times, The Guardian, Vice, and other publications. We're still going here. She has lived on 5 continents. She speaks 4 languages, and she is currently based in a cottage in a forest in Nairobi, Kenya, where she lives with her husband and children. Sarika, are you sitting in your cottage in the forest at the moment?
Yes, there are no monkeys today. They usually there's a lot, there's like 20 of them, or there's none of them. So today there's a day where there's none of them.
Have you had monkeys coming in your house and like stealing fruit and bread?
Yeah,
and
they're
that kind of thing?
extremely stereotypical and take the bananas. And there's one time that we left like the upstairs bathroom window open by mistake, and the monkey came downstairs into the kitchen. They knew exactly where to go, got the bananas. We found like banana peels all over the stairs, and then the monkey was just like sitting on the roof enjoying his snack. So.
Classic Kenya. So tell me about your little forest cottage there. How long have you guys been there, and how long have you guys been in Nairobi?
Yeah, so I've been in Nairobi for 8 years, and so kind of moved here. My husband and I moved here initially for his work. He works in clean energy, and it was just like, let's just try it. We'd been living in New York City for a long time, and New York City is amazing in many ways, but it's also it's a grind in others. And we were living in this, tiny 1-bedroom apartment and just wanted a bit of a change of pace of life. We came here and just loved that we were able to spend so much time outside. Kenyans are so kind and friendly. And then it turned out to be a great place to be based for both of our professional lives. And then once we had kids, so I've got 2 kids, then it's just such a wonderful place to raise children. The fact that they're able to spend so much time outdoors, that they have like right around us on our street, there's a bunch of other kids and they have play dates. I sometimes don't know exactly where they are, which I think is a sign of a great childhood. It just feels like a very different pace of life that I think for this stage is exactly what we are looking for.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you said you've been in Kenya 8 years, so I'm doing the math. So 2017, is that right? When you guys arrived?
Yeah. It was like right after Trump's election. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. What month in 2017 did you guys arrive?
We arrived in September 2017.
Okay. So we overlapped in Kenya by 10 months.
I wish we knew each other.
I know. My family and I left Nairobi in July 2018. So we were there. And I was there with my 2 little girls. We arrived with a 9-month-old baby. And then my second daughter was born at the Aga Khan Hospital in Nairobi. Is that where you had your...
Yes, that is where I had my son.
You had him at Aga Khan Hospital? Oh my gosh.
At Aga Khan Hospital. And I think, my landlord's also, right? Because Nairobi is such a village.
Did you have Dr. Patel?
I did not have Dr. Patel.
You did not have Dr. Patel.
No. But I barely needed a doctor. I literally got to the hospital and within a little bit more than an hour, it came out. It was like nature was doing its work regardless of whether there was a doctor there.
Totally agree on how Nairobi is such a wonderful place to be with small kids. I mean, it's just such wonderful weather and, such a community of kids and just swimming all the time, barefoot all the time, all the fruit growing in the garden. It's a really wonderful sort of environment. So
there's definitely moments where I just, I look at my kids and I just think, I wish every child on earth had access to this, and all it is literally just being able to be barefoot and climbing things and having the safety to be able to do that. And I just, that is my wish for the world.
Are there frustrating aspects that you find in terms of being in Nairobi versus, in the US or in Europe or something?
2 things in particular that are frustrating. One is that, of course, it is a developing country, and that means that some infrastructure is still developing. So we've had some challenges with the healthcare system, including when I gave birth, actually, and just other types of infrastructure on the road that, you end up having to patchwork things together a little bit more yourself in order to create a life that feels safe, that feels good, especially when you have young children. You don't want to just be total cowboy or whatever. And then the other thing that I find frustrating is that so much of Nairobi in the 90s, it was extremely unsafe. There were, kidnappings and whatnot. And that's when a lot of security infrastructure was built. So, people have really high walls, barbed wire, electric fences. And as a result, so much of life ends up taking place behind these walls and gates that you need to get access to, either by knowing someone or paying someone. And as a result, then there isn't nearly as much walkability and emphasis on the infrastructure created for public transportation and walkability and kind of just that pace of just daily life that, you have in other places where you end up encountering in a very serendipitous way, people of, many different socioeconomic statuses. So I think that's those are my 2 frustrations with living here. There are ways to ameliorate some of them, but they definitely that's part of what you get for the lovely weather and the everything else that you have.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I remember like you say, you feel like you're inside a bubble, inside the walls of your compound or the walls around your house. And then when you leave, you're inside the bubble of your car and you're kind of, always sort of enclosed. And pedestrian, it's not the most pedestrian friendly city.
No. I've definitely almost twisted an ankle walking on the sides of roads because it's just the infrastructure hasn't been prioritized to be built, even though I feel like the money is probably there, but it's just about priorities.
But what a fascinating experience for you and your family and your kids growing up there. And I'm sure, well, we're going to talk later in the episode about your favorite off the radar places to visit in Kenya. And I'm sure you've done a lot of exploring. So eager to get to that. But I would love to ask you about your travel writing, Sarika, because as we heard in your bio there, you've been writing about exploring, you've been writing about places for a really long time. And this seems like really the sort of underlying theme of your career, usually with a kind of like, how can we do this better sort of bent, or a kind of a solutions focus. So is this something that you've always wanted to do? Or like when you were a kid, did you kind of like feel yourself drawn to this? Or where has this sort of travel writing bug come from for you?
So I've always just loved storytelling in general. And growing up, we would go every few years to India to visit family. And in India, you just see so many stark divides. The way that actually what frustrates me sometimes about Nairobi living in bubbles, like you don't really have that quite as much in India, where you just you see so much very, in terms of people living in all sorts of situations, and you're interacting with people from many different walks of life on a daily basis. And I think that imprinted in me in a very deep way. And also just, staying with my grandparents there and seeing their values that were very oriented towards helping people always live life with dignity and respect. And so I think that has just been a through line throughout everything that I've done, is that I want to do that in some way, shape, or form. So I was drawn to storytelling, and then kind of got sucked into, writing a lot about global development issues and global health and education and gender and climate change, and all of those topics are very near and dear to my heart. I realized, though, that what even drew me to being interested in any of them was me being pulled out of my comfort zone, which, I grew up in suburban New York and pretty comfortable life, to be in places that really wildly took me out of that. And then, using those moments as these formative moments in my life. And I realized that it was always just through travel, through the lens of just being outside of my home, that I was able to first encounter people who lived very different lives than I did. And that's not just about privilege, but also just about choices and culture and family structures and all of these things, and just being in different places and just learning and like using those moments to not just not just consume, but actually to really engage and to use those moments as classrooms for me. And I think that is what drove me into wanting to be in travel journalism, is this sense of like travel has just played such a formative role in my life, has helped me see the reason why people should all live life with dignity and respect. And I feel like if I can kind of get people to want to explore the world in that kind of way that really gets, to helps you really engage with the world, then that feels like a small gift that I can give.
Amen to all of that, Sarika. I love what you say about getting outside of your comfort zone, which is just like so much of what I love about travel, and what a beautiful thing to aim to encourage people to do that with your own travel writing. Off the top of your head, do you have any sort of story about when you were thrown outside of your comfort zone and like how that led to sort of, an empowering or mind-opening sort of moment for you? I would love to hear.
So when I was a teenager, I went to Costa Rica on a Habitat for Humanity trip, and spent 2 weeks helping to build a house, despite having barely ever built IKEA furniture. All of a sudden,
Funny how that works.
yeah. And then while I was there, I also got my hair braided, and came back with these like box braids and whatnot. Like there's so many aspects of that trip that were kind of cringy. That number one, like, should I, with my hair texture, be getting my hair braided? Don't really know. Number two, I don't think that I had any business really building a house, and having raised money for me to go and do something that qualified construction professionals could have probably done in a day, what our team did in 2 weeks. at the same time, I think because even in those moments when I was there, like I was really happy, but I also like had this question always in the back of my head, like, is this the right thing to be doing? But so it's like, I think that having this experience that like definitely was morally questionable, but I still did it, and I still was there. I still met people, and got to know people. You just kind of having that time spent with individuals who live a very different life than you do. And I do speak Spanish, so that was very helpful as well. But I think that questioning sort of almost like led me down the path of journalism, of just wanting to always question the environments that I was in, and not just take things for a grain, just take things at face value, that this is a good thing to do, like just because it's being pitched as a volunteer experience, that this is something that is worthwhile to do. So I feel like that was something that I was there really grateful to have done it. And really grateful to have had a bit of a kind of questionable experience.
Oh, fascinating. Thank you for that. And I think probably a lot of people listening can sort of empathize with that experience. I mean, I certainly can. As a teenager, I went to Ghana for a month when I was 17 with American Field Service, and did a sort of a quote kind of volunteer project with my fellow sort of American high school students, which was questionable. But how wonderful that you've turned that into a motivating sort of force in your career. And I know you've written about volunteerism. We've talked about volunteerism and the sort of perils and possibilities there. So thank you for sharing that experience.
We'll get back to the interview in just a moment. I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip: hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop.
This episode is brought to you by Fandango. People say fans are too distracted these days, but the truth is, when a great movie hits the screen, you show up, you stay glued, invested, part of the story. And without fans like you, there'd be no cinema magic, no shared moments. So head to Fandango.com to get tickets, stream, or rent or buy top movies and series. Fandango loves fans.
Now, back to the show.
I would love to ask you a bit more about your other travel writing. Actually, specifically, I was going through the stories that you wrote for Afar recently, and I saw one that caught my eye about a trek that you made to Everest Base Camp. And you were there in 2024, is that right?
Correct. Yeah, May 2024.
Yeah. And I thought, I wanted to
I was
ask
2
you.
months pregnant, which was not in the story.
Oh, wow. I was doing, I knew when your last baby was born, and I was kind of doing the math in my head. And I was like, wait a second, it's possible. Wow. So, but yeah, how was it? I mean, I'd love to ask you about the experience and also kind of what you saw in terms of the community impacts of tourism there and the climate impacts that you're seeing. But yeah, how did you manage the altitude when you were in your first trimester? That's intense.
Yeah. It was definitely intense. I think that it was so the whole trip, the group that we traveled with, called Mountain Lodges of Nepal, their entire like raison d'etre is basically that they want to take people to places in a much slower, more deliberate way, more intentional. And at Everest, there is what's called the Everest Highway, because you can do the whole trek by yourself. And then there's these small tea houses that you can stay in, and you don't have to make a booking. You just kind of show up to the next town, and then you can just, get a really cheapy room to stay in and have some like Pringles and Snickers as sustenance, and then move on. So there is a way to travel this region of the world, this very delicate region of the world. on your own, which, I mean, there is obviously like a nice thing about like being by yourself and it in this place. But I think that for me, like having going with guides, it meant that we were able to go not on the widest trails, but on much narrower trails that I would not have been able to find on my own. We were going through these old growth pine forests. We were seeing there's something like 52 varieties of rhododendron flowers that were blooming, and that at these really high altitudes. And we were able to go into these Buddhist monasteries, and we were able to meet with monks, and we were able to go places that there weren't really other tourists there, and very, very much, I mean, I hate this expression, like off the beaten track in a way. And so that was what the whole trip kind of was. The whole point of the trip was to just like take a really different route through the Everest region. Being there in my first trimester, what was interesting was that I was forced to slow down. I think that the whole idea of Buddhism, which like, you see all of like so many signs of Buddhism, like you see that there's like stupas that you're passing, there's all of these different elements of Buddhism that you're kind of going through on the trail. And it's like the first thing of Buddhism is to let your ego go, right? And I kind of was forced to do that by biology. That already we're at high altitude, and I was waking up with morning sickness, and the only thing I could do was just like stop. I would just sort of like put my head down a little bit and just take really deep breaths, and then I would see these guys, the porters, who would be walking by. Some of them, like I saw twice, men with full refrigerators on their back walking uphill. And I'm like, okay, I have a fetus the size of like a lima bean, and I'm carrying like 3 liters of water with me. Okay, I can do this. And so it was just like this great humbling, but also it just kind of helped me sort of like move at the pace that I was meant to move at. And I was so grateful for that kind of like accidental lesson in humility.
Wow. And you got to speak with a monk while you were
Yes.
walking along in Hindi, you said. Is it
in Hindi?
speak,
So again, that's such a, honestly, like knowing languages has been the greatest gift for me in travel. It just makes you connect with people at such a deeper level. There was one monk that I wrote about, but I did actually speak to a couple of different monks along the journey, several of whom blessed the baby to be also, which was really so special. So I was able to talk to the one monk that I wrote about just like his journey towards monkhood and what he believes is important in Buddhism. And it's just to be able to have that kind of trip where you just kind of sit down and just happen to strike up a conversation with a monk about philosophy and life and religion, and then go on and eat some momos is like, I mean, that's a pretty great day. By my books.
Absolutely. And what a cool story for your baby, to know that when he was in mommy's tummy, like she was off having this amazing adventure, that's a cool story. One thing that struck me in reading your piece is that there was a little update, in the text saying actually, you're writing about this one lodge at one point, and you say just a couple of months after you were there, this whole lodge was wiped out by a landslide. That's crazy. Can you tell the story? Like what happened there?
And it was such a beautiful place. And again, this was very much off the beaten track. And I think that I will say that because it was more off the beaten track, that it meant that it's that I don't think anyone died. That and most people during that season actually had left that place to go to villages to stay with family. So that is like one thankful thing there. But yeah, I mean, the whole region is very sensitive. The being there kind of showed me that the weather just changes on a dime. You're trekking. I mean, anyone who's been to a high altitude place kind of has seen that, you need to pack lots of layers all the time because you can be going, it's a sunny day, all of a sudden a cloud comes and you're just all in a deluge. And it's like these are just extremely just sensitive places. And with warming climate, you just have much more unpredictable weather events, more extreme weather events. And in this case, there was, and I think that there's also something to be said about probably like infrastructure development towards creating just more protections against landslides. Like they can identify, where are places that are vulnerable to these weather events, and how do you create protections, like in terms of fences or other things that you can create to prevent this type of thing from happening in the future. But it was so sad to learn that just a few months after visiting this beautiful lodge in one of the most serene places I've ever been, walking past these stone fences that have just been built over hundreds of years by different people. I remember having a conversation with one of the people I was traveling with about just like imagining the stories that that these stones have seen over the course of hundreds of years, and then for all of it to just for one, really, really heavy monsoon rainfall to result in a landslide for the entire, so the entire village is completely wiped out, is just it just shows you just how fragile some things are. And just.
And with climate change, how it's all just kind of accelerating. I mean, one thing I didn't realize, and maybe I should have known this, I don't know. I've never been to the Everest. I've been to Nepal, but never to the Everest region. That actually Everest Base Camp is situated on a glacier. And so just in terms of the fragility of that site, it just seems like, that's intense.
Yeah, and it moves a little bit every year. It's a temporary camp. It's basically, I call it the high altitude, very extreme Burning Man, where it's, it's like set up and taken away. And we were actually, when we got there, it was like the very tail end. And so we saw a lot of these. And there's also, there's no roads there in the whole Everest region. So everything is transported by human, yak, or helicopter, and that's it. And so hence me seeing two grown men carrying full refrigerators up their backs. And so just, seeing that there obviously is so much tourism there. Tourism brings so much money to that region. And at the same time, it is built on a glacier. It does have to move every year a bit based on where it is. And it's actually right near the most dangerous part of people who actually climb Everest isn't even at the top. I mean, there's danger across the way, but is this area like right above base camp called the Khumbu Icefall, where you have these enormous pillars of ice that are extremely sharp. And because again, and these porters go and they set up these ladders and different things for climbers to be able to navigate them better. But even that, they have to change them every year. They have to change the routes, and things just become more slippery and a lot more fragile and uncertain. Also, just as climate change accelerates the rate of change of these fragile landscapes.
Wow. And you went right up to the Khumbu Icefall, is that right?
Yes. Yeah, I went up to the Khumbu Icefall. That's where I started feeling like a bit of altitude sickness, but luckily I'm okay.
Outside your comfort zone. There you go.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, that was maybe to the extreme. I feel like when my son is 18, I'll tell him all the whole story.
Oh my gosh. You mentioned earlier this phrase, the Everest Highway. And of course, so all of us have seen these photos of the lines of people sort of queuing to get to the summit of Everest. And I can only imagine the numbers that you see on the sort of the main route to get up to Everest Base Camp. Did you see some of those crowds? I know you took a sort of a more out of the way route, but did you see those crowds, and did you see sort of the trash or the impacts on the communities, or what was your impression of that, the kind of the crowding aspect there?
Yeah, I will say that on the trash element, there are a couple of organizations. Like, it was a remarkably clean trail for the amount of people that traverse it, which I was, but that's because of several organizations that have really worked. There were actually trash bins at different spots, and there were collection sites. So that was really, I was very, very heartened to see that. We did kind of, we ended up like zigging and zagging, and we ended up on the Everest highway at several times. It's like, I mean, anyone who's done any trekking knows, like, you're on like the wider trail, which is just a lot less scenic. And then it's, you just have, it was also like one big difference wasn't just the number of people, but also like the amount of yak poop, because that was also just the way that yaks would get around. So it was just like, so it was just more unpleasant for lots of different reasons. And so, it was fine. It was, I mean, I'm grateful that it exists for people to be able to explore it by themselves, but it was definitely a lot less charming for many reasons. And it was just, in a way it was more direct, to get from point A to point B. But I don't know, it's like, do you take such a trip in order to be direct? Is that actually the purpose of it? Or is the purpose of it to get lost in a pine forest and taking pictures of rhododendrons and talking to monks? So it's just, I think there's just a question there, more, just broader about the purpose of travel, purpose of taking time out of your life to visit a fragile region. What is your reason for going to these places?
Well, that's such a beautiful segue, Sarika, to the next topic that I want to talk about with you. And that is, what motivates us to go to a new place, and the idea of country counting specifically. So country counting, so the idea of keeping track of the number of countries you've ever visited in your life. This is something that I did when I was younger. I think I started around age 25 and did it for maybe about 10 years or so. I had a little spreadsheet where each time I got a new country, I would add it in. I would feel so proud of myself. And I tried to get a new country every year for a little while there. But I don't do it anymore. And I stopped doing it a little while ago. And I wrote a newsletter, a Substack about this recently called Confessions of a Recovering Country Counter, I think. And where I kind of talk about this a bit. And so I published a Substack, and very quickly afterwards, I got a message from you, Sarika, saying like, I forget exactly your wording, but like, amen. Yes. Like, I love talking about this. Like, I have a talk I give on this topic. And I was like, excellent. So anyway, so I would love to hear your thoughts, Sarika. Have you ever counted? Is this something that you used to do, count countries, or what's your personal experience with it first, maybe?
So I grew up as a first generation immigrant to the US, and travel to me, the first time I was on a plane was I was 7 months old. But travel to me growing up meant going to India to visit family, and for a short time going to school there also, and then coming back. And then we would do road trips around, like I was privileged to go. I had an aunt in England and would go visit her, but that was what travel was. And I think for so many people that actually is what travel is to visit family and to go places that have some meaning to go there, and not just to go for pure sake of tourism. But I would go back all the time to the same few places. And I think that because of that, I never really counted countries, because it just wasn't how travel was introduced to me or to my life. And then once I started realizing that that is a thing that people did, it never resonated with me. And I think that was because of doing road trips around in the US, realizing that every time we would go somewhere, we would see something new. And then every time I would go to India, I would be often sitting in relatives' houses, being like kind of force fed, and then going out into the market. And then even though, I was speaking Hindi, that like the vendors could see that I had an American accent, so my mom would make me stay quiet so that we could get better prices. And that was my entirety of India. And I knew that there was more to India than that. But I wanted to have a deeper relationship with my country of origin. And I think that, and realizing, I think that feeling like these two countries that were, where I grew up and where I was originally from, that I didn't know them very well at all. I think that always felt like so strange to me that just because there are 191 or however many countries in the world, But if you don't know the places, like each place is special, and just because it's not designated by a different country, that that it doesn't mean it doesn't count as going somewhere new.
Exactly. Yeah, I wrote in my newsletter how kind of gradually over the years it started to seem, at first it just started to seem less relevant, and I think I just kind of forgot about it, and then it kind of actively started to bother me because I was like, wait a second, like the idea of being motivated to visit a country because it's going to give me a new item on my list, that doesn't feel right. There's something about that. And I certainly know people, I have good friends who count countries and are really, really into it and are really motivated by this and who really go out of their way to, get their list as long as possible and talk about it openly and stuff like that. When I see that kind of motivation for travel, when I see that kind of behavior, it just makes me think, is that just kind of using the place, to serve you and to get back to Buddhism, your ego? It seems like it's kind of flattening the country in a way and all of its complexity and all of its history and turning it into, an item an item on a
To
list
consume,
or
yeah.
a box to tick off, something to consume. But I did get some interesting responses to that newsletter, and I'm curious if you've had conversations with this about people, where somebody wrote to me saying, "Oh, but I never really counted countries until like my kid did it for a school project, and then we actually counted them up, and it was kind of interesting to see the areas of the world that we'd been to and hadn't been to." And so I was like, okay, that seems like a different sort of approach, though. If it's not motivating your travel, it's okay to sort of like keep track, but maybe not let it motivate you. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. What does it even mean to visit a country? Like, I guess, if you have a passport stamp, that means something. But I remember in my early 20s when I was working at McKinsey, and a lot of my peers were traveling a lot for work. And this was also the beginnings of Facebook, when Facebook was a very different place, and, no Russian bots and all of that. And, I remember there was one person who would always like brag about the new countries that he happened to visit. And I knew some of the trips that he was taking, and like he would include like layovers. So it would be like an 8-hour layover in Amsterdam, and all of a sudden I visited the Netherlands. And then I remember another like mutual friend and I were like, not to be crass, but like, if you don't like take a number 2 in the country, does that even count as being in the country?
Everybody has their own rules, Sarika.
You haven't even given anything of yourself to it. But it was just like where does the line even start? Like, does a layover count? Does like you're doing these like multi-city bus trip through Europe, and you have like one night in this place, 2 nights in this place. Does that count? Where does it start? Do you know where the post office is? Because like knowing a little bit of infrastructure of a place, does that count? Does exiting, like leaving the main capital city, does that make it count? I don't know. I think that it goes down a bit of a slippery slope to me.
And once you're getting into those questions, you're just like, whoa, wait. The ridiculousness of the whole sort of enterprise, I think, just becomes revealed. But no, like the friend I'm thinking about, the rule is you have to spend 8 hours in the country outside the airport, and then you get to count it. Mm-hmm. And like, this is a very clear rule.
But what if it's 7.5?
Then you haven't been there. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll get back to the interview in just a moment.
Expedia. Hey, you. What you doing? Scrolling? Doom scrolling? Looking at other people's vacations? Miami, San Diego, Cancun? Okay, what about you? What places will you go? Expedia is the one place you go places. Your trip can earn rewards which you can use towards your next eligible stay. Soon, people will be doom scrolling you. You'll be that friend's friend, but with rewards. What are you waiting for? Expedia, the one place you go places. Terms apply.
Now, back to the show.
One thing that kind of irks me about it is that it really just discourages you from going back to a place, right? And I think, we can learn so much more from the places, just as you were talking about with India, we can learn so much more from the places we return to than from the places we breeze through for 8.5 hours outside the airport. Isn't it so much richer to go back to a city we've been to 3 or 4 times before, but going to another side of town, or learning about a history or a narrative that we didn't discover the first couple of times we were there, or really developing a relationship with the place, developing a relationship with some people who live in that place. Like, isn't that a much more rewarding for everyone involved sort of experience than spending 8.5 hours, just on the limits of the airport boundary?
Yeah, and that's not to discourage people from going to new places. I don't want to go become these purists of just thou must own, visit your city park until you have memorized every single branch of every tree, and that is the only place you're allowed to go. I don't want people to go to that other extreme. Yeah, so my family and I, we just booked a trip over the holidays to Thailand and Vietnam. Thailand is a country that I have been to many times. Vietnam is somewhere that I've always wanted to visit, but never have. I realized also through just doing a bit of research that phase of life of when you visit a place also really makes such a big difference in how you experience it. Because I feel like so many people go to Vietnam as backpacker travelers, and there's so much infrastructure set up for that. But, I'm going with 2 kids. I'm just not in that I'm not gonna, backpack with a 1-year-old. I mean, you can, but I'm not going to. And I also realized that just how large the country is. And, you do have to make choices at some point. And the phase of life that you're in also just ends up dictating the choices that you make and the sides of the country you end up seeing. So that's been a really kind of eye-opening experience for me as I've just been planning this recent trip.
Yeah, the rewards of return visits. And and I don't either want to sort of say, oh yeah, just go back to the same sort of 2 or 3 countries over and over again for the rest of your life. There's nothing else to see. And not to say also that it's necessarily a bad thing if you have a count and you like to sort of know how many countries you've been to. I mean, I guess it seems like for me where it tips over into kind of more kind of questionable territory is when the count becomes the purpose. The count becomes sort of the story itself and not a footnote to the story, or sort of an afterthought to the story, kind of thinking about why do you go to Everest? Do you go to get to tick the box of saying I made it, or do you go to explore the forest and talk to the monk and think about the stories that the stones have seen?
Yeah. Actually, one analogy that I could think of is people who are obsessed with knowing their weight. And
interesting.
Yeah, where it's I actually don't think that knowing your weight is necessarily the most useful indicator for how healthy you are always. It can be an indicator, but also, you want to think about your muscle mass and your, there's so many other elements, your BMI, your everything else, just your overall activity level. And it's if you let that weight number drive you, you will just go crazy, and it can become extremely unhealthy to a point. But it can be a nice, useful guide if used in a responsible way, as long as it's paired with other things and other understandings of this isn't the only way I can measure my health.
Absolutely. That's a really beautiful and powerful analogy, Sarika. I see that completely. Exactly. It's a factor, but let's look at the whole picture here, because it's so much more complex. And actually fixating on the number is just that fixation in itself is unhealthy, regardless of
people who just step on the scale every single day, then you think about your water weight, you think about this. And I just feel that it becomes its own obsession in and of itself that goes so beyond actually this bigger thing of am I healthy? And I think that there is just such a similar thing with travel of just you start thinking about well, on this trip, on the train, I passed through this country, I did this, I did that. And you don't actually think about okay, but was I a jerk to everyone along the way? And did I actually learn anything from any of these places? Do I remember it?
Did I get outside my comfort zone?
Did I get outside my comfort zone? Yeah.
Totally.
Did I see another way of living life? And I think that to me can be such a bigger gift of travel than just ticking the box.
Amazing. Amen. Well, speaking of exploring closer to home, I'm so excited for this last section of the interview, talking about Sarika's favorite places to explore in Kenya and some sort of like maybe unexpected parts or maybe some unexpected things to do in the country, Sarika. So tell us, what are your top recommendations for the country that you call home?
Yeah. So I'll say living here 8 years, every time I take a domestic trip somewhere, I learn about 5 new places to visit. And the list keeps getting longer as opposed to shorter, which is kind of amazing and just such a testament to what a rich and beautiful country this is. And yeah, and just it really truly has been a place that has given me so much. And I'm so, so lucky to call it home for this moment in time. Uh, so yeah, I would say that one uh, big thing about like traveling here, I think so many people come to Kenya and they just get in the safari vehicle and then they go to the national parks and that again is not to take away at all from doing that, because going like seeing a lion up close on a hunt is just, I mean, that is a once in a lifetime amazing opportunity for so many people. And I don't want to take that away from anyone. There are definitely other ways to do it. I think that that's what I have learned over the course of living here. And I think some of it depends on your own comfort and risk tolerance. But like my family and I, like we've had a lot of amazing experiences doing like almost like DIY safaris where we do a self-drive and sometimes like we do a self-drive with a tent, and there are campsites in some of these, both the national parks as well as if you explore outside national parks into community-run conservancies. You know, you just have a very, very different experience when you're kind of doing it by yourself as opposed to going with somebody. And you know, you're able to go at a bit of a different pace and in a way that is a lot more cost effective as well. And just end up exploring many other parts of places where you can still enjoy the nature, you can still enjoy the animals. So there are a few places that I've gone that have given me that opportunity. So there's this one area like on the you take what's called the Mombasa Road Highway out towards the coast, and then there's this one town that you get to called Voi, which is right near Savo West and Savo East, which are both of those are national parks. Nearby, there's several community-run conservancies as well, and so there's a few of them that you can go and that they have different campsites that you can visit. I can send a yeah.
Please. Yeah. So, I mean, I think I'd love to just pick apart this idea of, you know, doing your own camping in a national park, because people might be thinking like, what? But yeah, you can get to Nairobi, you can rent a car, maybe, you know, rent some camping equipment and go by your national park, drive out to a national park, buy your entrance and sleep in a campground, set up your tent and
yeah, and you have there'll be a ranger there. So that it's like and then also just know that like in general, if you have a fire going, that actually scares away most big animals. And you know, you can do it in a way that is not, it sounds a lot more unsafe, but I've done it with children. So I think if that provides any comfort.
We did that once in not Nairobi National Park, Hell's Gate National Park. We slept out, which doesn't have lions, but does have other things that could do some damage to you. But I remember like, you know, just hearing the animals sort of like howling at night when you're in the tent is, you know, pretty cool experience. And I remember hearing other family stories about like lions close to the tent and stuff. But you know, so take your precautions, but
take your precautions for sure, and have a ranger. I think that like and that also does provide like, you know, you're helping employ somebody and all of that. And these guys are trained and they know what they're doing a bit more. So I think it's just safety in numbers as well. So I would not do that as like a solo traveler. But if you can have a small group with you. But I think just as a concept of travel, then if you allow yourself to do that, then it opens up so many parts of Kenya to you. And I think that the other thing I've realized is that you see people always posting photos from the Masai Mara, Masai Mara is incredible. like an incredible ecosystem. Other parts of Kenya, specifically, like if you go up north to Laikipia County, to Samburu, the not only is it like a bit less touristed, but also both the flora and the fauna are different. And it's really, you think a safari looks one way because that's what you see pictures of. But actually, you go, I remember going to Samburu National Park, and we're there at sunrise, and we see this tree. It's called like a doom palm tree, and I think it's DOUM, and it looks like it's something out of like a Dr. Seuss book. It's just like absolutely incredible. And then it was just I have this picture where it's like the sun is just rising right behind it, and you just have all these colors of the morning sky, and then you have this like crazy looking tree in front of it. And then we saw there's the Grevy's zebra as opposed to the normal zebra, like the kind of more, I forget what it's called, but it's like it's a bit of an insulting
just
name.
common
Like
zebra or something.
The common zebra, yeah. I'm like, oh, what did the zebra do to deserve the common zebra name?
I think that's right. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
the normal one.
Yeah, but the Grevy zebra is a bit bigger. The stripes are a lot thinner, and it sort of, to me, feels a little bit more like on the verge of becoming like a unicorn. And it's just just being able to be face to face with different types of flora, fauna, just landscapes is a really incredible thing. The other thing I would say is is bird watching. And there's specifically, I had a great bird watching experience also in the north of Kenya at this mount called Mount Ololokwe. And it was there that I learned that there's this whole classification of places as IBAs, important bird areas.
Oh, wow.
And
Wait. Hold up. Is this an official, like, international classification?
It's an official thing, and it sounds very weird, but it's actually
important bird areas.
Yes, IBAs.
I'm in my 40s now. It's time I learn these kinds of things.
I know. Yeah, it's like yeah. When do you start developing like the grandpa hobbies, right? But I saw these like that are called like these red and yellow barbets that have these like polka dots on them, and these birds called honey guides, and these different sunbirds with really incredible colorings on them, and just as we were just hiking up and down the mountain, and it was so I think that people so often focus on the cats, which of course the cats are absolutely incredible, but it's these other creatures are also really, really beautiful to see. Lastly, I'll say that make one more plug for the Kenyan coast, which is absolutely beautiful. It is definitely, parts of it are very touristy, but if you can kind of find your way outside of them. So one place that I've been to in the south coast is called Msambweni, that is south of this area called Diani, that is very popular. Diani is absolutely beautiful, but it's about an hour south of that, and it's just much more quiet, depending on what you're looking for. But you're able to just kind of meet a lot more people, just connect with folks.
Okay, Sarika, thank you. So we have go camping in a national park, and you mentioned one that's near Savo West and Savo East in particular. But we'll put these links in the show notes, or put these details in the show notes so people can have them. So number one, go camping in national parks. Number two, go bird watching. Don't just be distracted by the cats. And is there a park or a place in particular that you recommend for bird watching?
2 places. So I mentioned Mount Ololokwe, which again, we can put that in the show notes. And then the second one was Lake Baringo that I've been to. That was also, I think, also an IBA. And number
Excellent.
3, go to the Kenyan coast and try to find your way up and down. Msambweni is very beautiful.
Okay, fantastic. I love all of those, and certainly the Kenyan coast. I have so many wonderful memories of like long weekend trips to the Kenyan coast. And one final sort of question on the Kenyan coast. I saw that you wrote a piece for Afar about Lamu, which we visited maybe 3 or 4 times when we were in the 4 years that we were in Nairobi, and I found just absolutely magical. But I could never write about it for an American outlet that I was pitching to, because it was on the State Department's level 4 travel advisory, which is sort of like, so they wouldn't, the publications I was pitching to had sort of rules against that kind of thing. So how is Lamu changing? I haven't been there in probably 7 or 8 years now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Lamu is beautiful. So I think that the other thing is like about the State Department warnings, there's Lamu Island and then there's Lamu County. And a lot of the warnings are actually about Lamu County, and then Lamu Island ends up being kind of put in that bucket, even though it's a little bit on its own. And there is a U.S. military base very close by that's sort of watching over everything that helps, with the safety and security element of it.
Can you paint a picture of what, for people who've never heard of Lamu, can you paint a picture of what the space
so Lamu
is?
So Lamu Island is off the north coast of Kenya, and it is it's kind of a place that feels in some ways a little frozen in time. There are very few cars on this island, maybe about 5, and a lot of the infrastructure of the island came from the trades with the Middle East, specifically Oman, and you also have some influence from India, of course, from Kenya and like Bantu speaking people and the Swahili people. You also have a bit of influence from the Portuguese. You have some influence apparently from Chinese shipwreck that came there hundreds of years ago. So you just have this real interesting mix of cultures, which you end up seeing through the architecture, and through the food, and as well as the culture. Lamu itself is a pretty closed society. So, there is, as a visitor, you very much feel like you're on the outside of that. And, but then Lamu town, because of its really incredible architecture, which is very Islamic in nature, has been named a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So it's a really, really cool place to visit. It's kind of, you think about like going to Africa, and this looks nothing like what you imagine it to be. The beaches are also really beautiful, and yeah, you just it's a very relaxed vibe. And lots of white buildings, lots of and these like really narrow little paths that are only fit for like a human or like a single donkey to go down. So it's
there are a good number of donkeys from in my memory.
Yeah. There's even a donkey hospital that helps rehabilitate donkeys with like broken legs and stuff. So yeah, it's a very, very special place. It's definitely. In recent years, there's now like a Lamu yoga festival there, and there is some like very, very high-end accommodation that's been built that is gorgeous. It's like, objectively very, very beautiful. But it definitely kind of exacerbates the difference to me between the people who are from Lamu, part of this much more like closed society, and the visitors who kind of come in, and there's an element of it that like I love the culture of it, but it does feel like the tourism it has a tinge of extractive culture to me, because it's so much of it is like they're chasing this like much more like luxury, high-end wellness tourism. So yeah, I don't know, it always just feels complicated. Like, how do you visit it in a responsible, respectful way? The last time I was there, I actually did see signboards that was really interesting, encouraging visitors to be respectful of culture and like keep your shoulders and your knees covered in public places, and don't be loud and drunk and in public, because it is, again, this much more closed Muslim society.
Well, wonderful, Sarika. And yes, wouldn't it be great if every place had those signs up to remind us to be respectful, thoughtful visitors? But thank you so much, Sarika. This makes me so excited to go back to Kenya. My daughter, who was born in Nairobi, is obsessed with the idea of going back. We've been back once since we left, but I would love to take them back again sometime soon. And yeah, we'll go camping in a national park. We'll check out the birds, and we will go check out Msambweni on the Kenyan coast, because I made it to Diani, but never made it to Msambweni. So thank you so much for these recommendations, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and share your thoughts on travel writing and country counting and Everest and Kenya. And it's been a pleasure.
It has been such a pleasure to chat with you, as always, Paige. And yeah, I look forward to listening to other podcasts that you do. And thank you so much.
So there you have it, Sarika Bansal. Thank you so much again to Sarika for taking the time to come on the show. What a pleasure to talk to her. I had a lot of fun in that conversation. And, on this question of country counting, I'm curious, how is that landing for you? Did you agree with what Sarika and I were saying? Do you have another perspective or another angle on this that we didn't talk about? I would honestly really love to hear your thoughts on that. And if you want to reach out, honestly, probably the best way to find me is on Substack these days. I'm kind of more there than on Instagram. I have a Substack newsletter called Letters from Elsewhere, where I'm writing about what it means to make a life, to make a home outside your native scaffolding, which is what I've personally been doing for the last 18 years or so. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Find me on Substack, send me a note, subscribe if you'd like to while you're there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode, or if you have an idea for a future guest on the Zero to Travel podcast, I'd love to hear that as well. So last thing before we say goodbye, at the top of the episode, I promised to share one of my favorite unexpected things to do or places to go in Kenya. So here it is. The place is called Castle Forest Lodge, and it's on the slopes of Mount Kenya, sort of tucked away in the forest, super atmospheric. There's a main house, main lodge, and then little cabins that you can also rent out a short walk away. The setting is just gorgeous, and there are literally elephants kind of roaming around just nearby, so you do need to be careful. But I remember sitting on the veranda having dinner, and literally elephants just wandered straight by the table we were sitting. So absolutely magical, 100% recommend. Check the show notes for a link to Castle Forest Lodge. So that's all from me for now. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I will see you again soon. In the meantime, peace and love to you and yours.
This podcast has been brought to you by ZeroToTravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.